It's Prank from Hell, written by It Rakshasa. You probably won't believe what I'm going to tell you. I don't blame you. My name is Evan. I'm 18 years old, unemployed, and heading off to college soon. Things haven't been the same for me since March. 4 months ago, my coworker went missing one night when he was working with me, and he hasn't been found since. I don't know if any of you have heard the news about this, but whatever they said, it isn't true. I tried to tell people what really happened, but nobody will listen to me. Nobody has looked at me the same since the incident. I've never done anything like this before, but I read some other users' stories, and I'm hoping some of you know what I'm going through, or at least don't think I'm a freak. I worked at my township's tennis complex. It's a little lonely place about a mile away from anything. The complex is set up on the edge of a peninsula with a river flowing between the tennis courts and the parking lot, with a small bridge connecting between them. When you cross the bridge, there are 2 outdoor courts and another 2 pickleball courts a ways up the hill. If you take a left, there are 3 bubble courts leading all the way down to the tennis hut. And yep, that's where I work. I check in people to their courts, answer the phone about scheduling, and occasionally walk around making sure that everything is okay. It seems pretty terrible, especially since I'm only making minimum wage, but my boss is rarely there, so I'm able to get work done or just hang out and watch Netflix or YouTube. Now, typically it's a one-man job. But for whatever reason, during the weekend shifts, 2 people are on duty because of the longer shift hours. Now, if it were up to me, I would have the work hours split into 2. But instead I work with someone else from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. Anyways, I was always working one of these long shifts back in March with a guy named Mike. We weren't close or anything, but he's a pretty chill dude who minded his own business. The time was 10, so it was time to close up. I was watching Netflix when Mike walked right in front of the desk and tapped on my laptop. I knew what he was going to ask me, but I was going to have none of it. "Nope," I protested. "I just had to deal with that one family a half hour ago. It's your turn." He was reluctant at first, but when he saw that I wasn't budging, he gave in. He grabbed a set of keys and left without saying another word. I went back to my show as I sat back with a smirk on my face. Some time had passed and Mike still wasn't back. I wasn't worried though. There have been times where people stay past their limit and it takes forever to get them to leave. Eventually, the end credits appeared on my screen and I realized I had watched an entire episode and Mike was still out there. I looked across the desk to see Mike's wallet and car keys sitting there, so there was no way that he just left. I groaned. All I wanted to do was go home and watch my next episode. I grabbed the second set of keys, turned off the lights, and I headed out. As I stepped out, I felt a gush of wind slice across my face. I didn't remember it being this cold when I came into work. I took a slight jog as I checked each tennis bubble. At this point, I was pretty upset that he was taking forever, but I couldn't find him. I decided to check the outdoor courts as well, but as you would have guessed, Mike was nowhere to be found. At this point, I had no idea what to do. Perhaps I had passed him and missed him when I was inside one of the tennis bubbles. I knew it was unlikely, but I had no other explanation. I decided to go back to the hut and wait there until Mike came back. Just as I was about to head back, a light came on in the hut. I muttered under my breath as I walked back hastily. I began to think of what I would say to him. Why did it take so long? What was he doing? I opened the door, ready to hand him the worst roast of his life, but nobody was there. I checked the back, but no one was there either. I had no time to wonder what was happening because the phone rang. That was odd. I rarely get any phone calls on my shift. Why would anybody be calling now? I picked up the phone and answered with the usual, "Johnson Tennis, this is Evan. How may I help you?" There was nothing. The other line was completely dead. And then it hit me. Mike was messing with me. I stormed out of the hut. I was so angry. I actually thought something serious had happened to him. "All right, Mike," I shouted. "The games are over. Come on out now." Nothing. "Quit effing around with me, man. I just want to go home. It's getting really late." Still nothing. I was not in the mood to be playing whatever game he had in mind. I circled around the tennis hut to make sure that he wasn't waiting to sneak up on me. The garage door to the back room wasn't opened and the bathrooms were empty. I was infuriated. So many thoughts and emotions were rushing through me. Feeling lost, I walked back into the office and I just stood there. I can't remember for how long, but it felt like hours. I snapped back to reality when all of a sudden, the phone rang again. I snatched the phone up and demanded to know what sort of joke was being played on me. Again, there was nothing on the other line. That was the last straw. Enraged, I yelled into the phone. "Listen here now, Mike. I'm gonna kill you. You hear me? You better..." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw through the window a person standing there with what seemed to be a phone up to their ear. I did a double take to make sure that my eyes weren't deceiving me. Sure enough, it looked to be Mike just standing there. Again, I muttered to myself as I slammed the phone down. I moved to the door and threw it open, ready to light Mike up. But as I looked out to the bridge, nothing was there. I had had enough, and I just wanted this cruel joke to end. As I let out a large sigh, my cell phone began to vibrate in my pocket. I almost didn't answer it, but eventually I decided to give Mike one last chance. The caller was unknown, go figure. But still, I answered it, expecting to hear nothing on the line. "Mike, please," I begged. "I'm done playing this game. Just let it end." I was met once again with absolute silence. I went to end the call and I heard a noise on the other end that made me jump. It was a soft cackle, but so raspy it sounded like the person's throat was being clawed at. "Mike?" I quivered. The voice answered.
"End. The game has only begun."
"Mike?" I asked again.
"No, he's alive with me."
The voice replied. I was completely confused. I had no idea what was happening.
"Are you ready to begin the game?"
The voice asked. I was still trying to wrap my head around everything that was happening. If this isn't Mike," I trembled. Then where is he?"
"No more questions."
The voice snapped back at me.
"Are you ready for the game to begin?"
What kind of..."
"You can either play the game, or you and your friend will die."
So, hearing that, I decided that it didn't seem like I had much of a choice. "All right," I said. "When will the game begin?"
"When I give the signal,"
the voice said. I had no idea on earth what this person was talking about. I didn't want to play a stupid game. I didn't even know what the game was. Just another dumb prank call, I assumed. But deep inside me, I knew something about this felt different. I just wanted to go home. I decided that I had had enough and I went to dial the police. I began to type in 911 into my keypad when all of a sudden, the power went out. I stood there frozen in fear as the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. It became really cold and dead quiet. I looked back at my phone to call the police, but it was completely off. I tried everything to turn it back on, but the screen was still black. I ran back into the office to see if the tennis hut's phone was still working. I picked up the phone, but I already knew that it would be dead. I looked down at my hands. They were shaking so much you would think that I was having a seizure. I tried to calm myself down by taking a few deep breaths, and eventually I was able to relax. I began to contemplate my next move. I looked out the window to make sure that nothing was there when suddenly I heard a loud boom behind me. My heart jumped as I spun around to see what it was. I heard a loud grinding noise as I realized someone was opening the garage into the back room. "Oh, F me," I said. I bolted out of the room as fast as I could. I had enough, and I couldn't care less if the tennis complex was robbed and I lost my job. I crossed the bridge and fumbled with my keys as I tried to pull them out of my pocket. I unlocked my car and I got in and pressed the lock button about 30 times. I stuck my key in the ignition and turned it as hard as I could, but the car wouldn't start. "No, no, 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 no," I cried. I tried 3 more times, but the car wouldn't turn over. I was breathing really fast and I tried to calm myself down. I tried to think happy thoughts. My family, friends, good moments in my life, anything that would help me from hyperventilating. Eventually, I was able to breathe normally again. I looked out to see if it was near. It was really dark out, and I couldn't see anything around the car or across the bridge. "What do I do now?" I asked myself. Just then, my phone rang and the whole panic cycle began again. I was shaking so much I couldn't even answer the call. Eventually, I was able to get a hold of myself and pick up the call. At first, the only thing I could hear was my heavy breathing, but then it spoke in a much darker tone than before.
"Did you really think you would be able to get away that easy? Get out of the vehicle now."
It said. "F you, man, I just want to go. I never did anything to you," I said, trying to sound as tough as I could. I was practically on the verge of tears.
"If you don't get out in the next 10 seconds, I'm going to kill your friend. And then you."
It snapped.
10, 9, 8.
What do you want from me?" I asked it.
7, 6, 5.
"Please, man, I'll do anything," I cried.
4, 3, 2.
All right, I'm getting out. See, I'm out of the car," I cried again. I couldn't hear anything, so I looked down at my phone to see that it had hung up. I was out of ideas. There was nowhere to go. I was about to make a run for it to the gas station, even though I knew I probably wouldn't be able to escape it. I was about to bolt to the exit when I remembered that there was a Kubota in the equipment shed at the top of the hill. It wasn't the ideal getaway, going only about 25 miles per hour, but I figured that it was better than running on foot. I scanned the area around me and decided my best shot would be to take a straight shot up through the woods. I ran as fast as I could across the bridge and up the hill. I didn't dare look back and kept pushing through the bushes and trees. Finally, I came to a clearing and I saw the shed. I came up to the doors of the shed and saw that the combo lock was still attached. That was a good sign, since only employees knew the combination, so it couldn't have been able to mess with a Kubota unless it destroyed the lock. I unlocked the doors and I swung them open, and I found the Kubota in good condition. I almost let my guard down until I heard a crunch come from behind me in the woods. Without hesitation, I grabbed the keys off the wall and I jumped in the Kubota. There was a bunch of stuff in the cargo bed covered by a tarp in the back, but I had no time to dump it off. I floored it out of the shed, leaving whatever was possibly coming out of the wood in the dust behind me. I was getting out of this place as fast as I could. I flew down the hill with my foot on the gas pedal. As I reached the bottom of the hill, I looked to see if it was hiding anywhere. If there was any place to jump out at me, it was here. I drove as fast as I could past the first 2 tennis bubbles, and I was just passing the third one to turn onto the bridge. Now, the next part I'm going to tell you is a little bit fuzzy, and I'm not exactly sure how it happened. As I passed the third bubble, the Kubota hit something. It was almost as if a rock had just appeared out of nowhere. The thing flipped, and the next thing I knew, I was upside down. Because I was in a rush, I hadn't even thought about putting my seatbelt on. I collided onto the pavement and tumbled a few feet. I'm not sure if I was knocked out, but I sat up off the ground in a daze. The left side of my face was completely scratched up from the pavement. I had the wind knocked out of me, and my leg was completely broken. For a moment, I wasn't exactly sure what to do as I stared at the ruined Kubota. I snapped back to my senses, however, when I saw it rise up from underneath the tarp in the back. Holy crap, I thought. It knew my every move. It was always just one step ahead of me. There's no way I can beat it. I picked myself up and I tried to run, but with my broken leg, there was no use trying to run away. In a panic, I went for the door to the tennis bubble. It was screaming at me from behind, but I didn't dare look back. The last of my energy and focus was getting to that door. I don't know why, but at the time, something inside me was telling me to go there. It was getting closer and louder, and I wouldn't look back. I felt its hand on me as I fell into the rotating door. I spun through the door to the other side. I looked up to find a horrifying sight. I had walked through a portal into hell. The entire place was on fire with the most horrifying creatures I'd ever seen. But the thing that scared me the most was it. It stood there as I stared into its eyes, and there was nothing there but an empty void of endless darkness. At first, I was confused as to how it got in there before me, but when I looked back, I saw a shell of a man looking back at me. At first, I didn't recognize him, but through all the blood and dirt on him, I realized that it was Mike. He looked just as bad as me. His entire face was covered in blood, all of his clothes were torn, and he was missing a piece of his ear.
Congratulations, the game is almost over. Thank you for such an entertaining night,
it said. Hey man, let us go now. I'm sorry for whatever we did. Please, just let us go. Mike cried.
Yes, one of you may leave now, but one of you must stay. It is your choice.
At the time, I didn't realize the significance of what it meant. It was coming towards us now, and part of my panel was open to the room of hell. Quickly, I shouted to Mike, spin the door around. Mike had his own ideas though. He was smart enough to realize that one of us wasn't going to make it. He was trying to squeeze through the small gap he had left back to the outside. He only had his arm outside, but eventually he would be able to get his whole body through. I screamed at Mike to stop. I didn't have a plan or anything, but I couldn't let him leave. It started to get closer. Please, Mike, I begged. He didn't even look at me. I knew what I had to do. I was just hoping I wouldn't have to. What happened next, I will never forget. I wish I could, but the screams just won't go away. I jumped into the door as hard as I could and I began to push. He started screaming and begged me to stop. As I kept pushing, the screams became louder and louder, and then, crack, the door gave way. At this point, the screams were just too much for me to bear. I hobbled as fast as I could through the dark. It then seemed to start laughing too as he screamed even louder in pain. I couldn't take it much longer. The screams hurt more than my leg. But then, without warning, they stopped. The lights flickered and then came back on. I kept pushing to my car though, and flopped into it when I reached it. I sat there for a moment trying to catch my breath when I saw a note on the dashboard. I snatched it and unraveled it to read,
"Congratulations.